Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 28th of July, 2018. And in today's session, we're going to talk a little bit about the MixPre series. And there's been a little bit of confusion, and I've had this question asked a lot of times. Hey, if I also record music, can I just buy the MixPre 3M, 6M, or 10M and use that for both music and for film and video projects? And I wanted to kind of address that question, talk about the differences between those two product lines, how they're similar and how they're different. First of all, the short answer to that is no. If you're going to do both, you really need to go for the MixPre 3, 6, or 10T. That's the short answer. If that's all you want to know, then thanks for coming by. We'll talk to you next time. But let me explain that in more detail. The main difference is that the way you multitrack record a song, for example, is significantly different than how you record for film or video projects. And let me just kind of talk about that in a few different ways. And I think the best way to do that is, let me first of all roll a little clip here that my brother and I worked on. He was kind enough to help me out. He is much more a musician than I am. And what we did here is we spent 5 minutes, in this particular case with the MixPre 10T, that also had the music plugin. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means in just a minute here. But this is what music recording is like.
To the car wash, baby. Ooh, honey, you know that I got money at the car wash, honey. Ooh yeah, yeah, ooh yeah, ooh, ooh yeah, ooh.
So what I was hoping you could kind of gather from that is that when you're recording music, a lot of times you're doing overdubbing. And what that means in practical terms is you will lay down one track or a series of instruments at one time, and then you'll come back, rewind, play that back, and while it's being played back, the musicians will lay down additional tracks. So they're layering all these different tracks, overdubbing. And that is a pretty critical thing for music production. And that's something that the stock MixPre 3, 6, and 10T don't do, unless you have it connected to a computer and working with a digital audio workstation app on your computer. So really what I think Sound Devices was trying to do with and has done, I think, quite effectively with the MixPre 3M, 6M, and 10M is they've created a device, a mobile device, that musicians can use to do multi-track recording without a computer. So no need to have a computer anymore. You'll notice in the clips that we just showed you there was no computer there. The MixPre was not connected to a computer. It was doing everything that you would normally connect to a computer with an audio interface and do for that multi-tracking, overdubbing. You can also do something called punch in, punch out, where you can actually correct a certain part of a take. So you can set a cue and punch in and punch out and just have the musician redo that one part that was a mistake or of some sort of, they wanted a better performance or whatever it may be. So those are kind of the main, kind of at a fundamental level, that's the big difference. Now, contrast that with film and video projects where you're recording dialogue in particular as an example. In those cases, you don't want to play back scene 1 while your actors are speaking their lines for scene 2. That doesn't make any sense at all, right? And that's how there's a significant difference in terms of how the user interface has to work with a music recording device and a recording device for film and video when you're recording dialogue or sound effects or whatever it may be. Now, to clear up any confusion, Sound Devices has also released a plugin that works with the MixPre 3, 6, and 10T to do all the stuff that the 3M, 6M, and 10M do. And so one of the things that people might be asking is, well, why can the 10T and the 6 and the 3 with a plugin do all the stuff the M does, but not the inverse? Well, there are actually some hardware differences as well, and I think there's some product differentiation going on as well. So the M series are generally, they are all less expensive than their non-M counterparts. So that is the 6M is less expensive than the 6, and the 3M is less expensive than the 3. And there's some things that are missing. So for example, one of the things that's missing is timecode. On each of those, the 3 and the 6 you have a timecode or an auxiliary input that can also read timecode from an external timecode generator. On the 10T, you actually have an inbuilt timecode generator plus the ability to read and send out timecode. So those are not on the M versions at all because the musicians don't need that kind of thing. It's just not necessary for what they're doing for that particular device. I'll go ahead and put a link down below for the music plugin. For the others, it costs $99 from Sound Devices directly. You go to this website, you enter your serial number, it'll tell you whether or not your device is compatible. I assume that all of the MixPre 3, 6, and 10Ts are compatible to use the plugin, but there is a little thing there to check your serial number to confirm. Now moving on, the plugin and the 3M, 6M, and 10M all have some additional features in addition to overdubbing and punching in and punching out. It also has some effects. So first of all, it has an air effect, which is something that is often applied to vocal takes for music. And it has a kind of a shimmery sound to it. And that can be helpful, especially for just kind of getting a sense for what the final piece will sound like. You can do an entire mix right in this little box here, or the 3M, the 6M, the 10M, or any of the others with the music plugin. And you can also use it to kind of lay down the ideas for a overall song, and then bring those into your digital audio workstation, have all of the stems, that is to say, all the individual tracks and all of the individual takes, and be able to mix those and create a more sophisticated, maybe more intense mix in your digital audio workstation application. So that's a possibility as well. Of course, it also has a reverb effect. Now, I guess I should go back and say, first of all, the air effect, which is something you especially hear like in hip-hop music on voices, can only be applied to a single channel. It's a pretty process-intensive type of effect. And so just so you're aware of that limitation. And then also reverb can be applied to multiple channels at the same time. And of course, I think most people know what reverb is. In addition to that, there are 3 different types of reverb offered within the plugin and in the 3M, 6M, and 10M, namely a plate reverb, a hall reverb, and a room reverb. So you can kind of dial in the particular sound that you want for, whatever makes sense for the particular mix you're working on. And that effect does not have to be saved to the take. You can bounce it and kind of bake in that effect to the take if you want to do that, but you don't have to do that either. So it can just be used for monitoring, and then it can be removed. And when you bring it into your digital audio workstation later, you can apply a really high quality reverb or air or whatever it is you want to do. So you're not committing necessarily right on the spot, and you can change things later. As I mentioned, you can also bounce tracks. That is to say, you can take multiple tracks and bounce them down to a single track or to a stereo track. And you can also, again, bake in those effects if you want to do that as well. In addition to all that, you can do some importing and rendering out to do a variety of different things. So first of all, for example, if you want to use this to play back some pre-recorded tracks while you're performing, you can do that as well. So that is, you can actually import those songs onto the SD card, put it in here, and then during your live performance, play it back, which is kind of an interesting and cool feature. In addition to that, you can mix down your entire song to a stereo mix if you wanted to do that. And again, you can kind of bake in all of those effects if you want to do that as well. Again, once you take the SD card out of the MixPre and bring it into your computer, you still have all of the takes for that entire project or session for that song. So it's pretty cool that way as well. Of course, there is also a metronome. So that's critical when you're recording music. As you're monitoring, you can choose which of the tracks are playing back and also whether or not the metronome plays back. You can get a lead in on the metronome as well. So all the kinds of things that musicians are typically looking for when they're doing that multi-track recording. Now, just to give an illustration, so my brother, again, did that one song. We spent 5 minutes figuring out how to use the music plugin on the MixPre 10T, spent 15 minutes recording those takes, and you heard what it sounded like. It was not something that's going to win him a Grammy, but it was, he was able to get an idea down pretty quickly. Then let's roll this next one for you where he actually brought all of those individual items into a digital audio workstation. In this case, I think he used Ableton or Pro Tools. Pretty sure it was Ableton, and he made this.
to the car wash, to the car wash, baby. Ooh, ah, honey, you know that I got money at the car wash, honey. Ooh, ah, baby, I drive my rusty bucket to the car wash, baby. Ooh, ah, honey, you know that I got money at the car wash, honey. Booyah, 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 ooh, ah. Booyah, 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 ooh, ah.
So the next question may be, well, how do I kind of switch modes on the MixPre 10T, 6, and 3 if I do have the music plug-in? How does that work? How can it do both user interfaces at this, at the same time? Well, it doesn't do them at the same time. The way you switch modes is you create a new project, and when you're creating the new project, you get an option for doing a music or an audio project. Music, of course, means a music song, and audio refers generally to the types of things we're going to do for video or film projects. So that's how you kind of switch back and forth between the two of them. So overall, I hope that was helpful in terms of identifying, which MixPre is probably a better fit for you depending on what you're doing. If you're just doing film, it's going to be the 3, 6, or 10T. If you're doing film and music, it's going to be the MixPre 3, 6, or 10T with the music plugin. And if you're just doing music, that's when the 3M, 6M, or 10M are probably a good fit for you. So overall, there's a look at that. Hope that was helpful in answering that question. Get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week.